Today, we're going to look at a news article about AI, artificial intelligence, and learn the pronunciation, intonation, and meaning of the text. Oh, and do watch out for the verse at the end. I think it's quite funny. Let's read the news article first before we look at the vocabulary. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. It is changing education. Schools across the world are scrambling to block AI language processing tool GPT, which produces human-like content on any subject in seconds. However, 3 universities in Australia have adopted a new landmark policy to allow students to use AI in assessments. Professor Lawson said, "Instead of banning students from using such programs, which would be an impossible task, we aim to help them use digital tools to support learning. AI is not going away, so we have to help students embrace this new technology in a productive and useful way and change with the times." Now I'll explain some of the more difficult language and phrases. Let's look at the vocabulary in this, some of the trickier words, so as you have an idea of what the article is about. And the first one I can see here is the word scrambling. Now, that comes from the verb to scramble. So this is a very common word in the English language with at least 5 meanings, so I would recommend you look it up. But in this context, schools across the world are scrambling to block AI language processing tool ChatGPT. It means to try very hard to do something, often competing with something else. For example, companies are scrambling to recruit skilled workers where there's a shortage. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And we have just below it, human-like content. So human-like content, this is a compound noun, and that's why we have that little hyphen between the 2 adjectives that come before the noun, human-like. And if you have human-like content, it just means that it has the characteristics of a human being. In this case, of course, the content might be an essay or some form of text that's been written by this AI language tool, but it actually feels like it's been written by a human being. Okay, next one. Landmark policy. A policy. Now, a policy is a set of plans or actions, but in this case, it's a landmark policy. And that means that the plans or actions are important and likely to influence future actions or decisions. So here in Australia, it's a new thing. It's a landmark policy, and they're actually going to allow students to use AI in assessments. For example, it was a landmark policy to allow all adult women in the UK to vote in 1928. Not that long ago, was it? Anymore. Yes, banning. To ban. To ban students or is to stop students. Stop or prevent someone from doing something. So, for example, if you're banned from your local nightclub, someone stops you from entering. Next one, embrace. Yes, embrace. To embrace something. This is not actually a hug in this context, but in this context, it means to completely accept something like a new idea or belief. For example, at work, you have to completely embrace your boss's new ideas. Yeah, okay. Here we are. Change with the times. To change with the times, what does this mean? If you change with the times, you keep up to date with new ideas, technology, and of course, AI. Now we'll look at the pronunciation and intonation. Then we'll get a chance to practice together. So let's look at the stress and weak forms first, followed by linking and intonation. So the first sentence, artificial intelligence is everywhere. So artificial intelligence is everywhere. Can you hear that? Artificial intelligence is everywhere. 3 stresses there. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. So the weak forms, artificial, and intelligence. Now, I heard another stress here, artificial. So let's put the other stress here. Can you hear it? Artificial intelligence, another weak form, is everywhere. Now, when we link these together, it becomes one, and it becomes the L sound. L, artificial intelligence. Okay, now let's look at the intonation. So notice with every stress, the intonation is higher. It goes up. So artificial intelligence is everywhere. Okay? Artificial intelligence is everywhere. Now, I could have linked is to everywhere, like is everywhere, but it's a lot clearer without the linking. So as I'm pretending to be a newsreader today, I'm not going to link quite so much. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. So, next sentence. It is changing education. It is changing education. Okay, so changing education. Weak forms. It is changing education. That's another stress there. Education. So we have two stresses here. Education. And after all shun words, you have a schwa. It is changing education. And we have a little link here between the consonant to the vowel. It is changing. Now, it is changing education. Education. Okay? Education. Can you hear it? It is changing education. Schools across the world are scrambling to block AI language processing tool. So schools across the world are scrambling to block AI language processing tool. So look at the weak forms. Schools across the world. We want a little schwa there. Schools across the world are scrambling. Now, this R is a weak form. Becomes scrambling to block. Again, little schwa there. To block AI language processing tool, because there's a comma there, the intonation will go up at the end. Okay, and remember what I said, schools across, so stress, schools across, can you hear it? Across the world are scrambling to block AI language processing tool. Processing tool. Schools across the world are scrambling to block AI language processing tool. Chat GPT. So that's Chat GPT. Okay, now there is a comma here, so that's why it's gone up at the end here. Chat GPT. Which produces, okay, put this schwa in here, produces human-like. So human-like content. Now, can you hear that? There are two little stresses here in this word, two stresses. Okay, which produces human-like content on any subject in seconds. Now, you could actually link these two together, consonant to vowel, subject in seconds. But I don't think I actually linked them, just to be clearer. And of course, in seconds comes down at the end. Seconds, don't forget the schwa here, the seconds. Okay, that's the end of the sentence, and that's why it comes down here. Now, human-like content. Did I say human-like content? No. I linked the k with the k here to make one k sound. Human-like content. Human-like content. Can you hear the difference? Human-like content. Which produces human-like content on any subject in seconds. However, did you hear that? However. Now there is a comma here. There's always a comma after however. But because of this word itself, it tells us there is more to come. There's always more to come after the word however. So you can go up at the end if you want to. However, however, like that. However, or however. Doesn't matter. However, or however, there's the stress. And of course you have the little schwa here for the sound. However, 3 universities in Australia have adopted a new landmark policy. Okay. However, 3 universities now in Australia have adopted. Now this have becomes a function word, have adopted a new landmark policy. Now let's look at the intonation here. Of course it's going to go up on the stress here. Universities in Australia have adopted a new landmark policy. However, 3 universities in Australia have adopted a new landmark policy. To allow, we have a little link there, to allow students, stress, students, and then weak form here for students to use AI. So to use AI in assessments. Assessments. Okay, and there we are. We have another schwa. In assessments. To allow students to use AI in assessments. Now, however, 3 universities in Australia, now I have a link here, universities in Australia, I have 2. 3 universities in Australia have adopted a new landmark policy to allow students to use AI in assessments. It comes down at the end. In assessments. However, 3 universities in Australia have adopted a new landmark policy to allow students to use AI in assessments. Professor Lawson said, so weak form, professor, now you can hear that stress. Professor Lawson, and Lawson, it's not Lawson, it's Lawson, said. Now, professor, is going to go up and down. Professor Lawson, so Lawson said, now, because we're going to say more here, it goes up, down, and a little bit up there at the end. Said, Professor Lawson said, instead of banning students, so instead of, there we are, and we have a little linking there. Instead of banning students, again, we have the link, the weak form here. Instead of banning students, instead of banning students from, which is here, from using such programs. Now, there are 2 stresses here. Programs, using such programs, Now, did you hear that? It didn't just go down, it went up again. Using such programs, we have a little comma here, and we can hear in the voice that there is more to come. From using such programs, which would be an impossible task, okay? So, which would be an impossible task. Possible task. We have a linking here. Bien. There are two vowel sounds, so bien, bien, and of course this is a weak n, which would be an impossible. Notice the weak schwa form here. Impossible task. Okay. Possible task. Again, comes up a little bit there at the end. Professor Lawson said, instead of banning students from using such programs, which would be an impossible task, we aim, I didn't link here, again I wanted to be very, very clear, so it was we aim, going up there, we aim to help, to help them use digital, two stresses, digital tools to support, support. There's your schwa, support, and of course to support, that function word there, to support learning, and up and down, end of sentence. We aim to help, so help them use digital tools to support, let's put the little arrow on, to support learning. It was probably a slightly less emphasis on the T here. We aim to help them use digital tools to support learning. Or you may have found that I actually did a stop T here, to support learning. I doubt it, because I'm a newsreader today, and therefore I would just say that T there, because it's important to be clear. To support learning. We aim to help them use digital tools to support learning. AI is not going away. So AI is not, negative, not going away. So AI is not going away. Now, little jump there at the end because of the comma. Going away. So we have to help students. So we have to help students embrace. Do you get the idea? The stress and the intonation are linked. Embrace this new technology, and this is an ology, technology, so technology, in a productive, so this vowel sound becomes weak, in a productive and useful, or unuseful, and useful, so useful, we don't say useful, we say useful way, and change with the times, and of course these two here, these two THs together become one, with the times, so change up with the times, and it goes up and down here, end of sentence, end of news article. Well, I hope that's helped. We did ask ChatGPT for a comment, and this was the reply. ChatGPT's just a tool, but it ain't no substitute for school. You can't cheat your way to the top. Using a machine to do your homework, you'll flop. For more pronunciation explained lessons, go here. Love and peace.